one day I asked the question, where do babies come from? And my mom, being very succinct, told me exactly what happened. And then when she got to the part of the uterus opening and the baby coming out of the vagina, I just looked at her and said, "What? What? I don't think I'm in for that. I really don't think I'm in for that." But I thought, I'm young, I'll change my mind. Everybody does. If everybody does it, I'm sure I could do it. But that was the beginning. That was the start of something in my head that said, I don't know if I really want this.
The very first thing I wanted to ask you was more about your actual upbringing and if you grew up in a more like traditional environment, if it was just mom, dad, kids.
You know why I love that question? Because so often people think that people who don't want to have children had either this deplorable, disgusting childhood or was raised with such abusive, horrible parenting. I had a splendid childhood. It was a life of fun, of love, of support from my mom and dad. My dad was the teacher, my mother was the businesswoman. She was the first person to be a woman who could fix television sets. And she was on What's My Line. And it was the kind of it was different in our community, because most mamas stayed home, baked cookies, and were there when their kids came home from school.
Do you think because your mother worked and maybe it was like a little less conventional to how other families were, that it broadened your mind more to like the idea of different possibilities? Or did you very much feel like I'm going to do what everybody else is doing?
Well, I would picture myself walking down the aisle and seeing this magnificent hunk. It was always a magnificent hunk at waiting for me. And of course, we would have the children. It was all like the fantasy of Cinderella, of all the books I've read or been given. And I got married to that gorgeous guy at the end of the under the chuppah, with the rabbi and the cantor and the whole thing. And as I walked down the aisle, I went, "Oh my God, I think now I'm supposed to have a baby." Well, we're young, I'll wait, maybe. But but happily, I was divorced within 3 years. So I had a reprieve until I met the second husband. Do not judge me. Do not judge me. And the second husband was lovely. I was older. I was in my beginning 30s when I married Warren. But I kept using contraception, and he did, and we both did. So it was sort of like an unwritten something or other that we both did not want to have children, but we didn't say it. It all came to a head when my father gave me the book, The Baby Trap by Ellen Peck. And it was given to me by his wife. She was a librarian and said, I think you should read this. And my father said, "Why don't you read this?" Well, I devoured it, literally devoured it in one night. Handed it to my then husband, Warren, and said, "Well, what do you think? We're getting such pressure now in our 30s. When are we going to have a baby? My mother in law would pat me on the tummy and say, "Go home and practice. How come that extra room is a guest room? Why not a baby room?" And the pressure at that point to have children was really mind-boggling. That book set me free. That book absolutely set me free. I was not abnormal. I did not have to go for therapy for, 500 years. And it was perfectly fine to live a lifestyle called non-parenting. At that time, it was non-parenting.
Did you have any concern or feeling like that you weren't getting this feeling of wanting to do it?
No, because I loved nurturing. And I was a teacher, and I adored my students. I couldn't wait to see them. They were the apple of my eyes. And I was the kind of teacher that could spend time because I was not running home to a child that needed me. I was running home to lesson plans and thinking, what can I do to make this experience more exciting so the children learn more and not just learn, but acquire the knowledge. So I was that passionate, excited teacher. And when I came home and I opened the door and there was peace in the house and I could have a glass of wine and sit back, and I watched my friends who all had children. They didn't have this.
Take me through that experience of how you ended up doing 60 Minutes.
After I read The Baby Trap, Ellen Peck, the author, and myself became friends. So my whole life started to shift to being this non-parent because it was the National Organization for Non-Parents. I was at the first convention with Ellen Peck. We had both worked on it. I met Isaac Asimov. I met the big mucky mucks all over who were supporting this movement to the child-free lifestyle. And they were filming, 60 Minutes was filming the first convention. Somebody heard that we had not told my then husband's parents and my own parents that we didn't want to have children. It was before we said anything. So Marion Golden, the producer, came up and said to me, Sue, I understand that you haven't said anything yet. I said, no, not yet, but we will. Well, do you think you could say something like fast, like closer to now? And I said, well, yeah, I could call. Well, I mean, tonight? Are you crazy? She said, no, can you call your in-laws or your mom? We just want to come right now after this convention and see what happens. Shoot me now. But me and Maureen said, okay. I called my mother-in-law and she said, what? What kind of interview do you want? I said, well, it's something that you may not like and it may hurt your feelings. Are you a nudie dancer? I said, no. Sex, you're a sex maniac, is that it? No. Group sex, no. Uh, you undress in front of people and you dance on the stage. No, Mom. You'll see. It's not that, but it could be upsetting to you. She says, okay, come on over. I'll get some rucola and I'll put some coffee up. And for 2 hours, we were literally bombarded with pronatalistic bullshit to the point where I never realized how much editing goes into any kind of filming. I didn't know. I signed a release saying, yeah, you can do anything you want. And I was looked, I got they seemed to feel like I was the bad bitch because in the video, and you can see it in the actual moment, I was I was being sought and had to answer everything. Warren just sat there going, looking back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You don't see my mother-in-law crying. You don't hear what went on. That was cut out. It was just I was the heavy, I was the bitch, I was the woman that made these poor people so unhappy. It was riveting.
Did your in-laws during the time of the taping, were they purely negative or were they supportive in any way?
I remember my father-in-law, saying, "Well, I mean, you're mature people and you have a right to your own choices, but it's just not normal for two people who are in love not to have children. I mean, I've never heard of anything like this. Perhaps you need some help or I mean something like that." And it was typical and understandable now, you know but I was so naive at that point. I didn't have the verbiage to go back at him and say what I really wanted or could say now.
Do you think the producers wanted to make this a piece about, oh gosh, there are all these terrible women who don't want to have children? Or do you think they sought out for it to be a little bit more real and then they just went with something more salacious?
I really think that there was a pronatal anger towards this whole thing. First of all, they aired it on Mother's Day. And Mike Wallace ended with pardon of perversion for airing this on Mother's Day. Good night.
Did you think, oh, people are going to have a negative reaction to me?
No, I was blindsided. I thought, having read the book and having been involved with Ellen as her friend and feeling the power that I finally had to say, this is a choice. It's personal. It doesn't affect anybody but me and perhaps the person I'm with or the family. But it's their choice to accept or not accept our lifestyle. No, I had no idea it, when I think back, I think I still have some PTSD from that whole experience because losing a job, I was blacklisted from teaching for 15 years. The day after this aired, I had no job. And so I picked up the phone and I called the superintendent of schools. And after he heard me, he said, I am really sorry, but this is a non concern of mine. And he hung up. NON at that time, National organization for non-parents. Never again did I have a job for 15 years.
In the actual moment, was your husband saying all the reasons why he didn't want to have kids?
But you don't hear him. It was me, the woman. He did not have death threats after this show. He did not lose his job. He did not have to face the wrath that I had to face. My dog's life was threatened to the point where at night, I would come home when I shut the blinds. I was so afraid. Letters that I got saying, you better be careful, your dog's next. We're not threatening you, we're also threatening your dog. When I spoke, I began to get angry and I began to speak. They were picketing in front of where I spoke with signs that said, "Godless bitch, go home. Not my kid. You can't talk to my kid." I just was blown away, never realizing what can happen if you have the nerve to say, "I don't want to have children."
Do you think in retrospect people were more afraid of the change than even just you and what you were saying?
I didn't want people to hear me. Um, it was so against the ingrained societal expectation of the woman's role, a religion that said, go forth and multiply.
Did that make you feel the desire to want to elaborate on your story because you had been so shortchanged?
Yeah, I became much more vocal. It took me a while, by the way, because after 60 minutes, I shut up. I was terrified. Those letters scared me. I was afraid. But I guess I'm a ball buster. And I guess, coming from a very strong mama and a very strong father, I began to say, no, this is not going to get me down. There's a need for me to speak. There are people out there who feel like I do, and I'm going to find a way to reach them and tell them it's okay.
Can you look back at it and be like, oh, maybe this was a blessing in disguise in some ways?
It was a blessing that I was on 60 Minutes. Oh, I never said that in my life. Thank you. Because of what's happened since then, I don't think I would have been on this path as crazy as I've been. That it catapulted me to being with you, to writing the book, to getting these thousand every day. Peeps, I keep getting messages saying, oh my God, I thought I was the only person on this planet that didn't want to have children. It's such a warm feeling for myself to know I've touched hearts. We have a lot of hearts that we still have to touch and a lot of education. And will it ever be acceptable? I sure hope so. I don't know. But if we just reach one person today who hears us, it's fabulous.